Hey guys, welcome back to Sandy Cats. Today we're going to talk about this 2022 GX460. We're going to do a full walk around video. I'm not going to tell you why I built it this way because I had a whole monologue on that in last week's video on the 4Runner, which, very similar builds. So if you really want to know what my mindset was behind this build, watch that video. This vehicle, in our opinion, is the best possible overlanding build. And I know this because I've been off-roading for a while. I have a 2019 4Runner that I, broke $20,000 in parts in under 10,000 miles, and I had to rebuild the whole thing. I'm still rebuilding it. So I learned a lot, and I knew what works and what doesn't work, and what's excessive and what's not excessive for this build, and what I need for my specific overlanding needs. So we're gonna go into this. At the end of the video, I'm gonna give you guys a full list of how much this build cost, what parts we used, and so on. So, if you think that this is the type of overland that you're gonna do, based on that last monologue from last week, then I recommend, just taking that list, see how much this really costs to get it dialed in and perfect. It took us, I wanna say 6 months to do this build. The truth is it took us a year because COVID, we were waiting for parts. But 6 months of actually hard building, getting everything tuned, getting everything dialed running it perfectly, and now it is. So for the last 3 months, we haven't touched anything on this rig because I've been off-roading it, we've been overlanding it, and just driving around town to make sure it is dialed in. At this point, I feel like it's 100% dialed in. Currently, it has less than 10,000 miles on it, and other than one mod, it's hopefully never gonna have to be modded again. The whole point of that was to put all these mods on, we're gonna have to maintain them, rebuild the shocks every year or so, but get them all on, get it done, get it dialed in, and have it run perfect for life, Get the maximum time and usage out of these mods. That's kind of my MO now. You'll learn why from the previous video. And the only other part that we're still waiting for is the Long Range America tank. Once we get that in, this vehicle is 100% dialed in and we are done. So we're just gonna get right into the walk around. Okay, so let's first discuss the front end. This is gonna be a CBI front bumper. I wouldn't recommend it, and I made a video on that. I'd recommend a Victory or something else. However, we have it. We're not gonna change it for anything. We're done with this vehicle, so it stays on forever. This is gonna be a Smitty built, I believe it's an X20 winch. I have those on every single one of my vehicles. I've had it for years. We've used it a lot. I have never had it fail, so can't say anything bad about it. And it's fairly cost effective. Okay, so let's continue on up since, we're here. So up there we have a Cali raised light bar. The only reason we got it I'm not a big fan of light bars above the windshield, and it's cheap. And the reason why we got it is because the Prinsu roof rack, it just looked too ugly, to be honest with you. It looked naked, it's too boxy. So we put the Cali raised bar there to kind of make it look nicer, and it does. But honestly, it's probably never gonna turn on. This vehicle is never gonna be a fast lead vehicle in a night run in the desert type of thing. If anything, it's gonna be a second, third vehicle. So the headlights are more than enough here. They're very bright. The stock fog lights are bright. I really didn't see any need for lighting here. Personally, if I put a light bar in, I try to put it down here somewhere, but there's really nowhere here that it will look good. So it's fine, we don't really need the light bar. The snorkel, that's a Dobinson. I did a video on snorkels. After I installed a Dobinson and I have Safari on the 4Runners, I realized Safari, in my opinion, is a much better quality snorkel. So I recommend going that route. And we, eventually may here, but honestly, it's too much work at this point. The reason why we have a snorkel is because, from experience, with the 4Runner, with stock system, air system, I would be, cleaning that filter every day, changing it out every 2-3 days in certain type of terrain, and your engine, you feel it when you're driving on the highway from trip to trip, and you didn't replace your filter, your engine really is not happy. So I try to do as much as I can to filter out as much as possible to keep that filter as clean as possible, and the snorkel really does help. We have the snorkel cyclone kits or whatever they're called, but honestly, I've tested them out. They don't really work that well. In the terrain that I go in a lot, which is desert, dust, and everything in between. So it only really filters out the big stuff. So that's where we're at right here. We have still a stock air system here, and hopefully we can keep it stocked. We're still testing it. But if that air system isn't enough, we might eventually go to an aftermarket cold air intake, not for more power, but to be able to put a bigger, thicker, you know, farm tractor type of filter in there. Other than that, this is fairly stock. There's an ARB compressor there, single, don't really need a double here, and we use from Thrasher Off-Road, but a lot of companies sell them, like a 4-way tire inflator kit. This has 3 transmission coolers, and after doing a lot of research, a lot of testing, I'm gonna make a separate video on this probably in the summer when it gets hotter, so I can compare a lot of vehicles, because these transmissions do not like big tires and skid plates. I only needed 1 big one, or maybe a dual, not 3. And it does really need a fan with a button on off for like slow hill climbs off-road. Then the reason why I keep 3 is because it doesn't hurt me in any way. No matter what, even if it's negative outside, that tranny is pretty much rising up to about 200 degrees, but it's staying there now with these fans. It's not going past it. So I think 2 would have let it stay there as well, or a big one even. What else here? And then we have a fuse box here for Amazon switch kit that costs like 60 or 70 bucks. Comes with the fuse box, it comes with everything. It works perfect. I've ran them for years, never had an issue with them either. I do have like the expensive one, I believe the Switch Pros one in the 4Runner that we're gonna be putting in. And I mean, the only difference is, from my personal perspective, if you're not running heavy fused stuff, there really isn't that much of a difference. So that's what we have. And then I made a bracket, a custom bracket. I believe OE, I don't know what company that is at this point, to be honest too. I found it on Amazon, I believe. Had a bracket for a GX. I had to customize a little bit, but it worked. Getting the ARB compressor in there was a little bit difficult. I had to make a custom bracket as well. I actually had like a regular bracket lying around from one of my other 4Runners. I cut it in half, and I was able to fit it in there with an ARB compressor. I'm not sure if they sell these brackets specifically for a GX, but you know, we just had it lying around, so we made it. So that's pretty much the front. Okay, so now let's get into the suspension. I made a separate video on this, so I don't really want to go too much in detail, so I'll just go really fast. This has the Elka adjustable coilover suspension with a 2.5 inch-ish lift, which we love. It works perfect on this rig. So the front has 700-pound coils, which I thought was gonna be excessive. It wasn't. The rear have OME 898 coils, which feel like they're about 5% too much actually, which is great because I'm hoping that when I put the auxiliary tank in, I won't have to change the coils out. But right now, the suspension was the easiest suspension I've ever dealt with to dial in. It worked perfect out of the box in essence, very little tuning. And you know, a couple of weeks ago I had a guy stop by here with a 22 or 23, I'm not sure, GX, brand new. Took this for a test drive, and he said this thing drives better than his stock vehicle. So it was a big compliment. Really happy with the suspension. Works great for you know, high desert stuff and for moderate rock crawling like we do, which is moderate here. In the front, we have SPC upper control arms. I used to run in that 4Runner, for example, in the green 4Runner, Uniballs, and they required too much maintenance. They were too squeaky, and I didn't really see the benefit of it, so I prefer SPC. There is one thing to consider is SPC require a good alignment guy to get them aligned right, so make sure you have a good shop, otherwise you might have issues. And I think that's pretty much it for the front. There is a KDSS drop bracket. This has KDSS clamps and a switch to control the KDSS from Dr. KDSS. The rear has full upper and lower links by, I believe, Rockman. And the rear panhard bar is adjustable. I think I did not need it to be adjustable though, because once I put the bracket on to lift the panhard bar, it would have worked fine with a stock one. So that's the one thing that I'm not sure is necessary. Now Dr. KSS makes one of those brackets to raise your panhard bar that's bolt on. I had to weld mine on. So I do recommend that bracket. But that's pretty much it with the suspension. Not much to say. There was a BMC chop as well here, and a lot of trimming. So that's something that you could see in the How to Fit 35s video that was posted a couple of months ago. So I guess I'll discuss the steering parts here, which isn't a lot, but I'll just throw it there. Has gusseted spindles. I bent the spindle with the 35s on a super easy trail, first time testing it out. It has, it's getting tie rod sleeves. I have them. I just don't want to deal with the alignment right now because you have to realign it afterwards. So I'm not going to install them until this thing is on alignment, maybe after a couple of off-road trips. And then when I go get the alignment done, I'll just bring the sleeves, we'll throw them on and then align it. And it has welded cam tabs, I think from Total Chaos. That's something that, you know, I strongly recommend just getting done right off the bat, so you don't have to, you know, get your alignment bolts out of whack all the time. So as far as the tires and rims, these are Cooper Discovery ST35s. They're 35, 12, 50, 17. I went through a KO2s like in under 5,000 miles, I believe. I tore 3 up, the sidewalls, the way I drive, which isn't, you know, how most people drive, but it is what it is. So my favorite tire that I've been played with a lot in the Jeep world and stuff is like the Toyo, Nitto, pretty much the same company, but they're heavy. And I didn't want to put that much stress on the front components on an independent front suspension. So my compromise was a Cooper. And I've been running Coopers for a little bit now on several vehicles, 3 of them actually, and I'm very happy. I heard that a lot of up north in Northern California, the park services love Coopers. They run them on all their rigs. They never have issues. That's why I tried it. And honestly, I haven't torn a sidewall on these things. I mean, they're great. They're soft. So I don't expect to get more than, the way we wheel at least, is I don't expect to get more than 20,000 miles out of these Coopers. If you're on road only, probably you get 40, 50, I don't know. But I don't expect to get 20 out of them. But that's a lot for the way we wheel, honestly, because usually I used to go through tires every 5,000, 10,000 miles on a Jeep. These are Black Rhino V-Lock wheels as well. My first 4Runner was the first time I tried a non-beadlock wheel. And because from the Jeeps I've always had beadlocks. So I figured I don't need a beadlock. I tried a non-beadlock wheel and I kept getting, I didn't unseat the vehicle, the tire from the rim, but what ends up happening a lot is when I air down more than most, maybe because it's a Jeep thing, I don't know. But when I'm going in the desert, I'm usually like, you know, 15, 18 PSI. I'm not at 25 PSI. So at that PSI, what I noticed is I kept getting leaks. I think like 2 out of my first 3 trips, I was getting air leaks. And that's because the sand would get in between the tire and the rim and just cause a slight leak. And that's when I realized, you know, I gotta go back to beadlocks. Haven't had that issue since with beadlocks. So that's why I run beadlocks. Again, these Black Rhinos were the lightest at the time that were available. Now they make lighter ones. So I'd probably get the lighter ones. I just really care about getting the best performance for the minimal amount of weight as I can in this area, because that's where a lot of stress goes onto the vehicle. This vehicle does not have wheel spacers. And that's because the wheel itself is a -30 offset. So it basically acts as its own wheel spacer. Pros and cons to that, but chances are you're not gonna get a gusseted spindle without a wheel spacer. So it is what it is. I'll talk about the axles too really fast since there's nothing to say. This has stock gears in it right now. The only thing it has is an axle breather from ARB. We might eventually put aftermarket, you know, 456 or 488s in this, but it runs fine with stock right now. I think that if we put in 456s, I'd be getting a little bit better miles per gallon, to be honest with you. The only problem is this doesn't have a rear locker. It only has a center locker, which surprisingly does not work that bad. But if we put in the gears, we might as well put the lockers in. So we're talking about, like, you know, with install, that's not something I would install myself, $5,000+. And at this point, we don't see the need for that expense, and we may never, but we'll see. Right now, it's running fine. We'll probably run at least another 10,000+ miles as is, and then we'll make that decision. Okay, so let's talk about the steel on this vehicle. Up there is a Princer roof rack, aluminum, but you get my point, right? It was popular, we decided to try it. Would I do it again? No. I would probably get like a Westcott Designs roof rack. I discussed that in the CPI video that I made. But it's here, we're not gonna change it out. It functions, it does what it's supposed to do. CBI rock rails, wouldn't get them again either, only because they look great, they look badass. But they require a lot of modification to fit 35s. I think if you go anything above 33s, you want to get different rock rails. Discussed that in my other video as well. Now let's talk about underneath. Underneath I have a lot of steel. And let me give you a quick monologue. When I got the 2019 4Runner, I went on the forums, I went online, social media, and everybody has their rooftop tents that weigh 200 pounds. They have their refrigerators, their drawer systems, their kitchens, everything, plus the kitchen sink in their vehicles, right? And then they have all the big bumpers and everything, right? And those guys are supposedly going out, wheeling hard, and I don't know how they're doing it, and I don't think they are, because there's no way you're wheeling hard with that much weight and not breaking things. And I learned my lesson the hard way. Well, that's where the $20,000+ of wasted money went, right? On that 2019 4Runner, in under 5,000 miles, actually, the whole story, right below 10,000 miles, I went through 3 tires, the KO2s. Not sure if that's a tire's fault or I'm heavy or what. I went through 2 steering racks. I went through 2 tire carriers on my bumper, and that just got from going fast and the tire carrier continuing to wobble until it breaks. I broke the lower shock mounts on the axle in the rear twice. The King shocks that I had, the expensive ones with adjustable coilovers, by 10,000 miles, I was on my basically second rebuild set, and they were blown. I kept blowing them. Like every 500 to 1,000 miles, I was blowing my rear shocks, honestly. I just kept getting it rebuilt, and they kept blowing, and I was just over it. There's other things that broke. I just don't remember everything, but I feel like everything broke, and I had to start from scratch, rebuild from scratch. And that was my lesson learned, my big financial lesson learned. These things are not meant to handle so much weight. And that was a 4Runner. A 4Runner and the GX are basically on the same platform. They're sharing the same parts everywhere, same frame. But this thing has a heavier motor. So this thing actually can take a little bit less abuse than a 4Runner because of it, because it's already comes from the factory with more weight on those weak steering components. So you want to be careful where you overload this. So I had to make some decisions, in short. And most people are going to decide to do against what I did, which is they're going to put their comforts and luxuries in the vehicle, put all their showers and blah, blah, blah in there, and not put under protection or go aluminum skids or whatever. I'm not a big fan of aluminum skids. I break them like this, one trip. So everything underneath is steel, everything underneath is heavy. That's where we decided to put our weight on our vehicles. Lower center of gravity, a lot of weight down there, and no fancy kitchen sets in the back, or drawer systems even. Again, that's just solely my decision for how we wheel. But we do end up using our skids a lot, and steel skids a lot, because I've been on trips that are rated sprinter trips online or whatever, like 5-6 day Baja trips, and nobody's actually been on those trips. They just say what it's rated, right? And when we went there, the road was gone. We spent 6 hours with shovels digging the roads in. Then we get to rock gardens that, you need 40-inch tires to get through, and there's no bypasses. So you're either in a position where you are figuring a way to winch yourself over these rocks and use your skids the whole time, or you're turning around, driving back 2 days just to go home, because you're about 4 hours from the Pacific Ocean, as long as you make it over these rocks. So I don't like to turn around. I want to be in a position that no matter what, my vehicle can get through. And if that requires me to pull out a winch, attach it to something, and literally drag this vehicle over rocks, I will do that. And I won't be proud of it, but I'll do it. So that's how I built these vehicles. I want to make sure that they can go anywhere, period. I'm not as worried about lockers as I am about skids, because with skids and a winch, it won't be pretty, but I can get through things. A lot of protection underneath. First, the front has, I think it's from SDHQ, it has the sensor guards for the ABS sensor, which until I learned about those things, man, I kept getting dust in there and they just kept deactivating. So very cheap, very easy upgrade, definitely recommend them. Full CBI skid underneath, would not recommend CBI, I'd recommend something like RCI or somebody else that, because with CBI, they're very difficult to take on and off. So that was another kind of mistake I made, but we have it, we're not gonna change it out. Full gas tank skid. Have used that recently, actually, a lot, thankfully. I have a rear axle diff skid. That one I'm not exactly sure how necessary it is, but I think it is. To be honest with you, coming from like a Jeep with, you know, a Dana 60 and even the Terraflex 44s, we never bothered with skids because the housing is strong. I don't think the housing is as strong on this one, so it doesn't hurt to have. Then we have, what else? I guess the one thing I guess that's controversial, and I'm still not sure if I want to keep it or not, is the lower control arm skids. I do have dents in those on one of the 4Runners, I think the white one. So maybe it's a good thing we have them, but I honestly think the lower control arms don't need them, but we still have them. And the thing that saved my life, the most important skid you can get, please, from a guy on Instagram called FJ Toyman. It's these lower control arm, lower shock skid system for the rear axle. I had the RCI skids for the rear axle and the bolt is exposed. And what happened is I was on I don't have a video of this unfortunately, but I was on a rock, I slid off the rock, sheared the bolt right off, lost my shock mount, you know, and that's it. So I wasn't a big fan of that system. And then in Baja, I lost the other shock mount as well using the RCIs, but that wasn't RCI's fault. That was me being very, very aggressive in wheeling. With the FJ Toyman, none of that happens. I mean, if it wasn't for these FJ Toyman skids, I would be on brand new vehicles, I would be chopping off the shock mounts and raising them up by 2 inches just to protect them. But because of the FJ Toyman skids, it just bolts on and it feels super solid. That's the most important thing to get, please. So that's pretty much it for the skid system. Because of all that weight down there, our trunk is basically empty. Keep in mind, this is for us, right? I'm the type of guy that'd rather spend 16 hours wheeling and 6 hours sleeping at camp, 2 hours packing and unpacking, and another 16 hours wheeling, versus spending 16 hours at camp and like wheeling for 4 hours. So I'm aggressive. More important, I don't really care about the luxuries as much as I care about the wheeling, the overlanding, the adventures, the hiking, whatever we're doing, right? So that's why we decided to forego a lot of the luxuries that a lot of people have. This does have rooftop tents. You'll see them around. There's a rooftop tent right there. We're building custom rooftop tents as well, which we may be selling eventually. But I don't drive around my rooftop tent on, is my point. I'll only throw it on when we are going on a trip where we're going to use them, right? Half the time, we don't even throw the rooftop tents on trips because, you know, we're only going for 2 days and we're going to have more time than I want to have at camp, so we don't need a rooftop tent. A ground tent is bigger, easier with the kids. We'll go ground tent. Rooftop tents are really, really good when you're going fast and hard. So that's pretty much that as far as the weight is concerned. Okay, so for the interior modifications, it's very minimal. My switch system is over here. We mounted it actually on a ram mount that's attached to a glass because we don't want to drill into this beautiful interior. Glued on a scan gauge here, mostly for transmission temperature monitoring. And we have a mic with a ham radio in there, which was mounted inside the glove box, the head unit, and the main unit's mounted in the back under the passenger seats. And that's pretty much it. With the 4Runner, my green 4Runner, the 19, I went crazy. Put a bunch of screens there, iPad mount, this, that, Garmin, and made myself look like I'm, you know, flying a jet plane in the military because I thought it was cool. And I hate all that stuff. We don't need it all, honestly. All you need is navigation. And with this system, I could just turn my Gaia on in the Lexus screen. So I don't even need a mounted navigation. My phone doesn't even have to be mounted. I could see everything I'm doing, communicate with the Gaia screen. I'm pretty sure it works with Onyx too. And I don't need anything here. So I have all the stuff out of the way. I'm just focusing on the road, focusing on enjoying my time and not on 50 different computers. I got into wraps just because it kind of makes our vehicle stand out and it gives you a little bit of protection, but honestly, I really don't care about the factory paint. So that's an excuse. It's really just for looks. I'm gonna start wrapping these vehicles myself eventually, so it'll be very cost effective to put wrap on. Otherwise, it's expensive. This vehicle specifically was built for my business partner and a really good friend of mine, Arthur, who you know, wheels with us all the time, works with me all the time, and is always here. That's why you see this vehicle all the time. But he's pretty new to overlanding. So another reason why we put this wrap on is because he's going to be scratching it more than, you know, most people. So we wanted to add that extra protection. This is, you know, topographical wrap, but the whole vehicle is actually wrapped. We just wrapped it in black just for that paint protection. Probably in the near future, I'm going to wrap it myself, and it's going to be a much cooler wrap, but, you know, not necessary, like I said. So lastly, let's discuss the rear. That's the antenna for the two-way radio. It's on an Amazon mount, forgot what it's called, but it'll be in the description. This has a MagnaFlow exhaust, which comes out the side, and we cut it back a few times because we kept hitting it on rocks. I think it's called the Overlander series exhaust or something. It's actually not bad, it's pretty good. I prefer the Borla on the 4Runner over this, to be honest with you, but it's pretty good, and it's what was available for cheap at the time. So we tried it, and we're not gonna change it. As you can see my MO, trying not to modify things anymore. This is an Expedition 1 rear bumper. I did a whole video on this. This is, if I do it again, I would get this bumper again. And on the 4Runner I have this bumper, and if I would do it again, I would get this bumper again. Very happy with it. On my green 4Runner, this bumper doesn't work because it's on 37s, so we're doing custom bumper, probably from Outgear Solutions. I'm gonna work with them, but this is the bumper I would get for plug and play. I keep my water here. This is gonna have the Long Range America tank underneath, so there's gonna be no more space there. So the water is kept here with our Sandy Cat shower system and sink system. You open this up. Got a little table system there that comes from Expedition 1. And you open up the rear, and it is magically empty. All we did was delete the third row and put a goose gear plate on here. Like I said, I had to sacrifice weight somewhere, and this is where we sacrificed weight. We maybe we will end up putting a drawer system here. I think the company's like SHW Off-Road or something. They're about 40 pounds. The whole drawer system is like 40 or 50 pounds if you remove all the excess stuff that it comes with. And it's super duper light. That's the only reason I put it in there. I would not put any, I would not add another 100 to 200 or 300 pounds of drawer systems and fridge systems in here because that's too much weight. I learned my lesson the first time. Again, if I didn't have all those skid plates underneath and the Long Range America tank, that's a different conversation, right? But I had to choose my priorities. And my priorities are to make sure my vehicle gets through everywhere. I'm a big fan of wolf packs from Front Runner. I have them all over the garage. I use them for personal use, I use them for everything. And here they are, just lying around the garage. So literally, come with a cap. What I usually do is I'll throw a fridge here. If this is the only vehicle that's going out, we throw a fridge here, throw a bunch of wolf packs in here, throw those sleeping bags on top, and we're good to go. The reason why this is built the way it is because chances are this is almost never going to be the only vehicle going out. So we're always going to have 2 or 3 vehicles going out, and the other vehicles are built to handle the fridge instead. So that's pretty much it. I think this build is badass, but I know that a lot of overlanders probably are like scratching their head because it doesn't have all the overlanding fancy gear. I don't feel like it's necessary for us with this specific build. The green 4Runner is going to have all that overlanding gear, and when we need it, we'll take that rig out, but it's on a Dana 60 axle. So it can handle all the skid plates and all the weight, and I don't have any concerns on breakage based on the way we wheel, because we wheel hard and fast. This vehicle can handle moderate rock crawling even without the lockers, because we've taken it on Hell's Revenge, Top of the World, we just did like Gold Mountain up in Big Bear, which, you know, some people consider hard. This vehicle just kind of do it almost blindfolded. And this vehicle has handled and can handle, you know, 500-600 off-road only miles in a short period, in a couple of days, and sometimes going 40-50 miles an hour in the desert for long periods of time. Not too long, but it can handle, you know, doing those type of expeditions as well. So I think this is a good all-around build for what we can do without overloading it and getting into very expensive components. That was kind of the whole point with this. Yes, I can throw a bunch of stuff in here and put the fridges in and the drawer systems in and a 200-300 pound rooftop tent in and blah blah, I'm gonna start breaking things. I gotta start replacing it. And then you're getting into a very, very expensive build. This is not an expensive build, to be honest with you. For what it is, for what this vehicle can do, this is not an expensive build in my opinion. So we are very, very happy with it. And again, my whole goal, I'm gonna say it the last time, was no more headaches. We're done with it. Maybe that drawer system, definitely the long range tank, and I think that's pretty much it. And it should be good to go for a long time. We're excited to start using it for real now. Thank you guys, subscribe, like, you know, stuff like that.